The Euphrates River is drying up, opening access to multiple ancient sites and a cave. The water level of the Euphrates River has substantially decreased over the past few years. Some people are quick to point out the drying as a confirmation of Bible prophecies regarding the end times. But is that the case? The Euphrates River originates in the eastern Turkish highlands and flows through Syria and Iraq before joining the Tigris River. It has unrivaled historical significance because it was the birthplace of some of the world's first civilizations. Along its banks, Mesopotamia, sometimes known as the land between the rivers, developed, giving rise to outstanding ancient towns like Ur and Babylon. The river, which was once essential to trade, agriculture, and culture, has left a significant and lasting legacy. The Bible foretold that this enormous river would completely dry up, and that terrible things would transpire when this happened more than 2,000 years ago. In Revelation chapter 16, verse 12, it is said that, "And the sixth angel poured out his vial upon the great river Euphrates, and the water thereof was dried up, that the way of the kings of the east might be prepared." In this verse, it is stated that the sixth angel poured his bowl onto the Euphrates River. The river dried up as a result of the bowl's contents. The majority of the water on earth has been either tainted or destroyed by previous bowl judgments. See Revelation chapter 16, verses 1 through 4. This verdict is not intended to taint or prohibit the use of this water. Instead, it appears to be about demolishing a defensive barrier to open the way for advancing eastern kingdoms. 5 times in the Bible, the Euphrates is referred to as the Great River. It served as Israel's inheritance's eastern limit. See Deuteronomy chapter 1 verse 7 and chapter 11 verse 24. Israel was somewhat protected by the river because it was challenging to cross and a desert lay between it and Canaan, the promised land to the west. It travels about 2,000 kilometers towards Palestine before turning southeast toward the Persian Gulf. When Revelation was written in the 1st century, the Euphrates separated east from west, and the kingdoms of China and India were located beyond it to the east. Centuries earlier, Cyrus of Persia's forces overthrew Babylon by rerouting the Euphrates River through the city. They were able to march into Babylon and take the city by using the dried-up riverbed. The eastern invader will march through Babylon and Palestine during the Great Tribulation after crossing the Euphrates. 2 months after U.S. forces invaded Iraq, on Tuesday, April 29, 2003, BBC News published an item that seems so bizarre that it goes against the fundamental nature of reality. Now, in order to fully appreciate the significance of this piece, we must travel back in time to a period almost 2,500 years before the birth of Christ, and to a place that is currently known as modern-day Iraq. And it is here that we start. Our tale features mystical creatures who were prevalent throughout the ancient world. All of the ancient Jewish traditions, including the Bible, the books of Enoch and giants, as well as other texts, describe an event in which fallen angels came to earth and deceived people with their understanding of science, war, and beauty. A real race of giants, as well as other horrifying monsters using animal DNA, were created by these fallen angels, or watchers as they are known in ancient literature, using human genetics and DNA. The Book of Giants, which was a portion of the Dead Sea Scrolls collection, contains description of these revolting creatures. They describe the same exact event in a manner similar to those of other ancient books, but from the viewpoint of the fallen angels or the Watchers. For instance, the Watchers were regarded favorably in ancient Babylon and Mesopotamia. They came to assist humanity. They also taught humans how to perform cool things and produced a powerful race of renowned gigantic men. But according to biblical accounts, these things are bad. According to the Bible, fallen angels under the direction of Lucifer themselves are only interested in the utter annihilation of humanity. According to one tale from the Babylonian age, the ancient Apkallu were divine like the Watchers. Given that they were the progeny of angels and human women, the enormous beings were unholy. Because angels were not allowed to have sex with women, the giants were the offspring of disobedience and the source of all the evil in the earth. This would result in Noah's deluge, which was intended to purge the world of its evil. The deluge is said to have destroyed every supernatural being. In one of his epics, Era claimed to be the deity of sickness and plague. The Apkallu had been exiled by Marduk to the vicinity as retribution for inciting him to send the flood. Even though the flood destroyed the majority of them, it turns out that some of the giants survived. They multiplied. It's interesting to note that the 4 Apkallu that surfaced after the flood were only partially divine and had the ability to reproduce with humans. The last of the post-flood Apkallu, Lunana, was 2/3 Apkallu, once more much like the Watchers. As stated in the description of Gilgamesh, who is said to be 2/3 divine and 1/3 man, this description fits him. Gilgamesh is referred to as Lord of the Apkallu on the cylinder seal, and he is also given credit for bringing back a wealth of knowledge from before the flood in other places. When drawing a comparison between the Apkallu and the Watchers, academics frequently analyze the way the Watchers are depicted in Second Temple Jewish literature. At least in part, the Book of Enoch served as a Jewish response to the Babylonian captivity. Although potentially harmful, it was thought that the Apkallu had preserved some pre-flood knowledge that the Lagan wizards of Babylon valued. But such knowledge was bad in the eyes of the Jews, and the Watchers were depicted as such in Enochian literature. We now have 2 perspectives of the same epic story. On the one hand, we have the story being told by the God of the Bible, the universe's creator. Yes, these fallen Watchers are wicked, he is saying, and you must avoid them at all costs. And yet another account comes directly from the Watchers themselves, who said, "Hey, that little guy," in reference to God. "I wouldn't worry about that little guy. He's a little fella who can do nothing to us." For many years, academics have recognized similarities between the patriarchal stories in the Bible and the Mesopotamian mythology. Depending on whose culture authored the myth, Enoch resembles an ancient monarch by the name of End-Meteranki, whereas Noah goes by many names depending on where he lived, including Utnapishtim in Babylon, Ziusudra in Sumeria, and Ultra-Assis in Akkad. Even those accounts, however, are a supernatural psyop that is part of the military campaign for the fallen kingdom. For instance, Gilgamesh is described in the Mesopotamian stories as a powerful warrior who is 2/3 god and 1/3 man, making him a hero. He goes on adventures and defeats monsters, including Humbaba, the protector of the remote cedar forest, who was tasked with terrorizing people by the god Enlil, who was Enki's brother. Gilgamesh was one of the enormous progeny of the Watchers in the Second Temple Jewish story known as the Book of Giants. Just like Humbaba, the monster Gilgamesh himself went out to slay. Between the time of the Babylonian exile and the birth of Jesus, this was how Jews perceived Gilgamesh. He basically belonged to the Nephilim race. If you're unfamiliar with the term, a Nephilim is the unholy progeny of a fallen warrior and a human woman. Resuming with Gilgamesh, he was a huge creature known as a Nephilim, a hybrid of the supernatural and human. Now is when things start to go insane. Scholars really hold that Gilgamesh existed, and in addition, this 2003 story from the BBC News says that they may have actually found his tomb. I don't want to say it was definitely the grave of King Gilgamesh, but it looks very similar to that described in Epic Jörg. Jörg Fossbetter of the Bavarian Department of Historical Monuments in Munich told the BBC World Service Science in Action program. So let's consider this in the context of the whole and see if anything makes sense. Because everything involved is still a mystery as of now. First of all, the Bible predicts a day when the Nephilim will reappear. Some individuals think that this is a demonic possession that is making a spiritual return. Some people think it is physical, as in the giants making a comeback. Fast forward 2,000 years, and 2 months after U.S. forces invade Iraq, researchers discover Gilgamesh's tomb there. It is conceivable that when the word of the discovery of Gilgamesh's tomb reached the highest echelons of government, instructions were issued and U.S. troops were dispatched to the site to shut it off. The skeleton's DNA was taken and tested with CRISPR-Cas9 and cloning technologies in a top-secret underground research facility. Of course, our only opinion is to conjecture. What do you make of this then? Do you believe, as this report claims, that Gilgamesh's tomb was actually discovered in 2003? What happened to it if so? And why are the contents not mentioned? Perhaps what they discovered was so trivial that they decided to end all news coverage. Regional rivalries and conflicts are common in West Asia. Water shortages are affecting millions of people in Syria and Iraq as the Euphrates, the region's longest river, dries up. Drought diplomacy has been going on between Israel and Jordan over limited water resources, while Kuwait is turning the biggest tire dump in the world into a city. West Asia's civilization originated along the Euphrates River. Millions of people in Iraq and Syria have depended on this river for thousands of years, but it has recently plunged to a historic low, causing the biggest water crisis the area has seen in recent memory. You might be wondering how this relates to the Gilgamesh tomb, Watchers, and Nephilim. The spot where the tomb is thought to have been discovered is thought to be located beneath the Euphrates River bed, so that's the connection. If the Israelic discovery is authentic, it suggests that Gilgamesh had deeper ties to the area than previously believed. This raises concerns about the hero's tale's possible ties to Mesopotamian mythology, which featured characters like the Watchers and the Nephilim. The strange events around the Euphrates may be related to these old traditions. While it may seem speculative to relate Gilgamesh's burial place in Israel to the dying Euphrates River and the mysterious events that have occurred along its path, doing so compels us to think about the supernatural aspects of ancient mythology and the connections between historical and spiritual storytelling. The idea that celestial creatures or fallen angels could have an impact on reality has long been a source of interest and discussion.